recording so you guys can see it later on YouTube if you're not able to stay and watch the whole thing, or maybe some of you didn't watch the original live and have come and found it on YouTube. But welcome to Tea with me! As promised, remember I told you guys, if you remember, like a week or so ago, that I had something I wanted to show you guys, and I got a traditional Middle Eastern setup that unfortunately I didn't realize I wasn't going to be able to showcase properly on the live. But look, guys, I got a full like traditional Middle Eastern setup with the traditional teapots and everything. So eventually, inshallah, I'll set it all up properly and I'll be able to show it to you guys better than I have now. Thanks from Korea. Hi! So yeah, let's make some tea. Ateta gave me a better cup than I originally had because the ones I was using weren't exactly traditional. They were close, but not exactly right. Alright, we're going to pour the tea. I am not going to knock this over. Have you heard of? No, I haven't. Karim or Kareem? Sorry, I read that really quickly. I haven't heard of that. No. Where are you in the Middle East? I'm not in the Middle East. I'm in Australia. But my mum's family, I should say, are from the Middle East, and my father's family are from Ireland. All right. As always, today for Tea with B, I'm having berry tea. In future, I'm going to try and show you guys how I make my tea. So at the moment, it's just something simple. Like I've just put the tea bag in itself with some lemon and honey. I love to add lemon and honey to my herbal teas. Hi, Samaha. And then in future, I'm going to make a whole bunch of different teas and try and show you guys. All right. I have my cup. Yeah. Let's pour. Okay. Yallah, I think I filled it a little bit too much to the top. I wish I could like film this for you guys the way I film it on my other camera, because it's angled and it's so much easier to then to watch. It's a bit hot. Yeah, a bit hot. All right, we'll come back to the show. All right. Today, as promised last week, I'm so sorry guys, by the way, I couldn't do the live last week. I accidentally had dairy. So side topic, I don't want to get too sidetracked from today's topic. I promised I was going to talk about, PTSD again, like the previous live, part 2. But yeah, last week while I was at work, I accidentally had some dairy, and I didn't realize that there was milk products in what I was eating. And then all of a sudden, my nose started congesting, and then it started blocking up, like swelling from the inside, and I couldn't breathe. So I had to call quits. I had to cancel the rest of my teaching for the day, and then I couldn't go live. It was just a whole horrible evening last week. But we are back, yeah. Am I fluent in Arabic? No, I am not fluent, unfortunately. But actually, I am studying it. I did start studying it about 2 years ago at university for 1 year. And I learned how to read and write, so I was really happy with that. But I learned I learned a bit of the dialogue. However, I didn't learn anywhere near as much as I did with the writing. So I was wondering if maybe you guys wanted me to start sharing that journey with you. I'm not lactose intolerant. I'm actually allergic to dairy, which is why my nose completely swells. Like the intolerance, I know this is gonna completely throw you guys off because I haven't said anything about it until now. I actually also think that I'm gluten intolerant because ever since I've cut out the dairy, although everything has gotten so much better, my acne's gotten better, alhamdulillah, my breathing through my nose, all of these things, the eczema, but it's still not exactly 100%. And then I've had 2 days where I had some gluten, and I noticed that I was still kind of having bad reactions in my nose, where I couldn't breathe either. So I'm wondering if there's a bit of an allergy to the gluten as well, or an intolerance. I'm not 100% sure yet, but we'll see. But Yes, so I got sidetracked, but today's episode is Talking PTSD Part 2. Last week, I was really touched with how many of you guys were coming on here and talking about your own personal traumas, your own issues that you felt were stemming into PTSD. So I'm going to kickstart today's session by referencing a question that someone has asked me. They've sent me a DM. In future, I'm going to try and get another phone so I can read out your DMs in front, because I have two phones, but one is doing the live, the other is filming. So I need a third phone now, apparently. But yeah, someone sent me in a DM asking me about what I felt like they could do with a recurring dream. So someone said that they are having this same recurring dream I talked about last episode, if let's call it that. On that last live, I mentioned about how I used to have nightmares when I first ran away from home. I was having this reoccurring nightmare that stayed with me for years, and even now, it's been 8 years since I ran away from home, and every now and again that nightmare still creeps into my dreams. Not as regularly as it used to. It used to be something that happened every night and then every week, until it disintegrated into every month, etc. So, unfortunately, I don't actually have an amazing answer for the person that sent that in. Other than, unfortunately, in my experience, all I could do was ride the wave. And I just tried when I woke up from those nightmares. PTSD, for the people asking. PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a mental health issue that comes from a traumatic event or experience, etc., that someone has been through. That's to put it quite simply. So basically, when I was having those reoccurring nightmares, when I first ran away from home, I literally just had to ride the wave. Like I didn't know at the time that I even had PTSD, and it was just something that I just had to try and tolerate. So I don't actually know what you could do to stop it, other than when you wake up, that you start giving yourself those positive reinforcements verbally to remind yourself of where you are and that everything's okay. I know that for me, a lot of you might have seen when I'm filming, I film in front of a wall of photographs, right? Why do I have so many photos on my wall? It's because those first few years when I ran away from home, I made a lot of amazing memories, alhamdulillah, that I'm so grateful for, and to remind myself of where I am in life and how far I've come, and that how much happier I am and how much more grateful I should be. I look at that wall. I look at all my photos from when I traveled around Europe with my friends, with my family, when I graduated, etc., and all these different things that I've been able to achieve, and that is how I cope. So when I wake up from my nightmares, I used to have things on my side table. For example, a photograph that I could look at that immediately would remind me of a time post running away from home. So that visual sort of memory. I am also very much about smells. So I might put, in my diffuser, I might have some sort of a comforting smell that I really enjoy. Like, for example, something sweet like vanilla. Also some calming music. I adore classical music. You could put on whatever it is that you like. So some sort of, calming piano music in the background, something really soft and subtle, just these sort of sensory things. Again, I'm not a psych, so I'm just telling you from my own experience. I actually don't even know if the person that asked me the question, if they're on my live tonight, but they'll see it later on when I upload it. But yeah, if you're unfortunately suffering from nightmares because of your PTSD, the only suggestion, aside from first and foremost, obviously go and speak to a psychologist if it's something you feel like you need help with. But aside from that, the only suggestions I can make are ones based in sensory responses. So just to summarize, put some visual prompts out in your room, things like photographs. That's what I did. My room is covered in them. Some smells that are comforting and calming to you, and the same with sounds. So like I mentioned, I put classical music, but you could put anything that calms you, anything that makes you feel at ease, if that makes sense. If anyone is having tea or drinking anything with me, sahten, sláinte, cheers. I love, if you haven't had this tea before, I'll try and show you guys on camera. Oops, I'm trying to show it on 2 cameras. If you can see it, it's like a pink color, pinky sort of purpley hue. It's a berry tea. So it's a mixture of loganberries, strawberries, and raspberries. And it is honestly the nicest tea that I have ever had. And if you have it the way I have it, I'm quite biased. I love it. There's some lemon and honey in there, and it just adds that sweet and bitter taste to it, which is really nice. Visual prompts, photographs, comforting smells, calming music. Yeah, exactly. Who said Santa in? I said Sahtin, which is to your health in Arabic. I need to try some. You guys really, in Australia, I buy it from Coles, from a local supermarket. But honestly, if you're from abroad, like in your local supermarket doesn't sell it, you can make it. You can go to a tea store and get the leaves. You can put it together. Actually, I might try and show you guys that another day on a live. And I'll show you how you actually put it into the teapot and you brew it. It would be really nice to do it from scratch, actually. All right. Now that I've answered that question, does anybody have any questions or anything they want me to talk about with PTSD? So, is there a brand name for the tea? It's just a berry tea from Twinings. I feel like I could do a whole session on tea. on tea. But yeah, do you guys have anything in particular you want me to talk about when it comes to PTSD? I'm having some sort of water to start the day. Do you know, even at the start of the day, I have tea. I will have black tea with lemon and honey. If the Twinings brilliant tea. I love Twinings. The smile looks stunning. Thank you. The person who's commenting about my smile has helped me out with my teeth whitening process. Anyone that's been watching me on my stories with my teeth, I'm going to share with you guys. I meant to do it last night, but I was so busy. I'll try and do it tonight or tomorrow. I'll show you guys the before and after. I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. My teeth have actually come up really nice and bright. I'm so happy. All right, think it's time to pour another tea. I'm actually getting through my tea today. All right, PTSD. Let's stay on the topic. So, I hope I answered that question sufficiently for the person that sent it to me, that asked me. All right. All right, guys. So, like I said to anyone who's drinking some tea with me, Sláinte, Sahtin, cheers. Can't start the day without tea. It goes wrong thanks to the Pakistan genes of tea addiction. Honest to God, if I try and start my day without tea, I am honestly just really mellow. That's probably the caffeine that just hasn't hit me yet. But I end up really mellow and I'm just flat until I end up having that first sip of tea. Until then, nothing is going right, like you were saying. It's just completely the opposite of everything I'm trying to achieve. All right, first question, talking PTSD. Did you ever have an official diagnosis of PTSD? Is this a thing? Thank you, not saying it's invalid without, just curious. Yeah, no, of course it is a thing. So I got an official diagnosis about 7.5 years ago, when I mentioned this last session of talking PTSD on Tea with B. I mentioned I went to my psychologist at the request of my uncle. My uncle noticed what he was suspicious of being symptoms of PTSD in me. There was some things that had happened and I was reacting in an unusual manner that he thought might be likened to a trauma response. So I went at his request to go and speak to a psychologist. I got a referral from my doctor. And basically I sat in my second session, it would have been. It was the first or second session where I sat there and I had to answer a bunch of questions. I had to scale some of my responses. Some of them were short answers. Some of them were closed-ended, and some of them were scaled responses. And And basically, at the end of the assessment, she evaluated my responses to conclude as to whether or not she felt that I was suffering from PTSD. And that took about an hour. It started with those questions that were scaled, that were closed-ended, and then it started with those moved into those open-ended questions. And eventually that led into her discussing with me at the end that she identifies that there is PTSD going on. So that was a really poor way of wording it, but you get what I mean. And yeah, I hope that helps. All right. How can you identify if you have PTSD if you've never been diagnosed? So I probably never would have gone to a psychologist if it weren't for my uncle. And even if my uncle didn't suggest, hey, I think you've got some trauma response happening here. Eventually, if somebody had said to me, look, you're really down or you're having all these nightmares, etc. And if nobody picked up that it might have been a trauma response, I still would have gone to a psychologist and my psychologist would have picked it up. It's not something that you really, the weight or the responsibility, I should say, is not on you. The onus, there you go. The onus is not on you to determine whether or not you have PTSD. You might be suspicious of these things and that's totally fine, but it's not really your, I'm not going to say responsibility again. It's not your job. So if you have issues of concern, and it doesn't matter whether it's related to do with PTSD or not, it could be anxiety, it could be, like I mentioned before, depression, you go speak to a psychologist, they will identify it for you. I am positive that my psych would have picked up on it straight away the moment I started mentioning nightmares, even though I didn't realize it myself yet. The moment I started to mention nightmares or my avoidance behaviors, things that I was doing to avoid scenarios because I didn't want it to remind me of how I felt previously living with my mom. For example, me not wanting to have children, that is in itself a trauma response. Maybe not entirely, but for the most part, it is a trauma response because I don't want to be in a situation where it reminds me of what it felt like to live with my mother. So just saying those things alone, those avoidance behaviors, the nightmares, etc., all of that she would have picked up by herself. It's not something, like I've said 10,000 times, I'm so sorry, but it's not something you had to figure out all by yourself. Me with my Yorkshire tea. I hear Yorkshire tea is quite nice, actually. All right, I'm just going to scroll up because it stopped scrolling and then I don't know how many I've missed. I'm so sorry. Good on you for going to a psychologist. Thank you. I definitely recommend for anybody who feels like they're struggling, you don't need to do it alone. Go and speak to someone if you can. Is there such a thing as minor PTSD? I would like to know because I might have it, but I'm not sure. I've never heard of that exact term, but I can assume based on the title as to what you're referring to. And to be honest, perhaps there probably is something as a minor, as you said, minor case of PTSD. In other words, like levels. So, everyone's different. I know people, I know of people, I should say, that have PTSD and they end up being hospitalized because their brain completely shuts down and they start having fits. Like PTSD can be on completely different levels from one person to the next. So it can be something quite silent in its response where it's very internalized and nobody would really notice it unless the person experiencing it is vocalizing the issue. It can be something like me where I start hyperventilating. Maybe that's actually something I meant to start talking about with PTSD. So with me, you can see it, obviously nothing like on the level of the people that I just mentioned in the hospital. But in terms of of me, when I get triggered, I start hyperventilating and then I start getting very, very emotional and worked up and everything starts going crazy in my mind until I absolutely belt out into an anxiety attack. And yeah. But there are other people that I've seen in videos where their responses are quite intense. I can't imagine having to go through it like that. There are different levels. I'm a therapist. There you go. Oh my gosh. I'm actually so glad that there's a therapist on here. Okay, because you can affirm things to me, because I feel like I'm a broken record on my lives where I'm constantly saying things like, I'm not a psychologist, but, or if you feel like this, you should go see a psychologist, etc. But yeah, okay, that's good. I'm really glad there's someone on here that is. All right, let's see. It's called mild PTSD. There we go. And it often overlaps or is mistaken for anxiety. Do you know, actually, that makes a lot of sense, because when I first had my uncle mention to me the potential of PTSD, and even when my psychologist first said to me, you have post-traumatic stress disorder, I just assumed I had anxiety. And I just assumed it was just more than the average person, and that's why I was having the things like the nightmares, etc. And don't get me wrong, I do have anxiety. I suppose the two go hand in hand. You know, anxiety definitely would be prominent when you're constantly being, you know, fearful of triggers, etc. But I am so grateful that my uncle picked up on it, because then I was better able to respond to my issues accordingly, rather than just brushing over them and just trying to calm myself down the way I would for anxiety, etc. All right. Thank you for your answer. You're welcome. Don't mention it. All right. Do you talk to your dad about this much? Or better way to phrase, who do you talk to the most about this now? I'll answer both of your questions. Do I talk to my father much about my issues, about PTSD? In the beginning, I did. When I first ran away from home, not straight away, it took me some time, but let's say about 2 years in, I did have a few sessions where I would have a D&M with my father. But then I kind of started to feel like it was secondhand trauma for my dad, if that makes sense. That's the nicest way I can word it. I'm sure you all understand. Like, I felt like it was traumatic for him hearing what his daughter had been through. And my father is quite an emotional person, and he's been through so much himself. So I started to feel like I was adding to his issues, and I didn't really want to do that, and I withdrew. So then I started opening up more to my grandfather, and then also my partner at the time. Seldom my friends, really. I think probably because friends come and go so much that like, you know, throughout school, that it was just, I'd kind of been a bit scarred from that. So then when it came to my university friends and things like that, I would open up to maybe 2 people. So yeah, then to flow into your second half of your question, the most would definitely be my grandfather. Over the last 8 years, that's probably the person I spoke to the absolute most. And then in terms of the present time, it's definitely obviously going to be my partner, because if you can't, you know, open up to your partner, then they really shouldn't be your partner, right? So, like, I remember the first time I had a PTSD episode, you know, when I was triggered with my partner for the very first time. That in itself was triggering, because I remember sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this person has never seen me be triggered. They've never seen what it's exactly like for their partner to have PTSD. And now that they're experiencing it, I was getting so anxious that they were going to view me differently, or, you know, be scared or terrified and run off because of the fact that they were so worried. But obviously that was not the case. But yeah, it's definitely for me, my grandfather and my partner. All right. Sis, you're on. I hope you heard me answering your question. If not, well, it's the first thing that I answer on the video anyway when I upload it. All right. Do you still have trauma responses all these years later? Example, if someone talks in particular tone or way, it can set off the PTSD. I still have the same I still have the same responses even 8 years later. To my knowledge, my psychologist did mention to me that this never goes away. Although it might improve, it might get better at times, it never fully goes away. It's something to do with the rewiring of the brain in a defensive mechanism. It's just a way to protect you out of fear of something similar in the future happening again. So those responses will never leave me. They don't leave anybody that has PTSD. You just learn how to manage them better. So yes, 8 years later, if somebody starts to become rather aggressive in their tone towards me, I will immediately shut off. Anything in the nature of their tone that reminds me of the way my mother used to speak to me, I completely shut out. I shut down. I have nothing. I have no solid contribution to give back to that conversation, unless the tone isn't reminding me of my mother, and then I will try and stand my own and hold my ground. But if in any way I feel like perhaps the tone was uncalled for, or it took me by surprise, that is probably my biggest issue, when somebody switches up quite spontaneously and it takes me by surprise, and especially when that surprise is unjustifiable. It's in my opinion come out of nowhere. I completely and totally same trauma response that I've had my entire life. Right, so let's keep scrolling. Thank you so much, Loretta. Thank you so much. You're too kind. I really appreciate it. Oh, thanks, Mary. You guys are so sweet. Thank you so much. Our brains are beautiful in how they protect us. That's true. It can be hard to come to terms with at times. I too have PTSD. I'm so sorry. And I'm still working through it. God is working it for good. I'm so sorry, Hannah, that you've got PTSD. I know it's an awful thing to have to live with, but you are right. It's just something you have to come to terms with. It's unfortunate, but like you said, in a way, it's beautiful if you think about it from the opposite perspective, that our brains are just trying to protect us. In essence, that's quite a nice thing. It's quite sweet if we look at it that way. Sending love from the Mediterranean. Much love from Australia. I nearly forgot my tea. Why am I whispering? Does being mixed affect the PTSD? For example, the arguments 24/7 about different beliefs with a tone. I'm Anglo-Arab and I'm still scared of my parents arguing because I feel like something. Okay, does being mixed affect the PTSD? Perhaps when I was younger, not so much now. I feel like that's something that has improved a lot. Growing up, I think the only reason that being mixed affected my PTSD is because my mother blamed everything on my dad. So, for example, anything that went wrong with my upbringing, anything wrong that she felt was wrong about my personality, everything was blamed on the fact that, oh, it's because you're Irish, it's because you're your father's daughter, you're like your father. And that messed with my head a lot growing up, because naturally as a child you believe everything that your parents tell you. You believe everything that they're saying. You don't question it growing up. So I had, if you like it, a bit of an identity crisis where I was kind of feeling like there was something wrong with me for being Irish. And perhaps when I first ran away from home, it took me a long time. You've actually really got me thinking. It took me a long time to fully accept my Irish culture because I was so wired to accept what my mother had previously said about my father's culture and family, that I was terrified that perhaps some of it was true, and that the more I accepted and took in, that potentially the worse I was going to get as a person. So, but yeah, that's definitely gone. I've spent so much time with my Irish family and they've healed me so much. And I've gone overseas to Ireland for a few weeks. I've experienced so much more in that culture that I'm just absolutely in love with it so much. I'm so grateful for that aspect of my life that's pretty much healed, if you like, for the most part. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Negative. Oops, sorry, it's moving too quickly. Negative may happen, like for example, being abandoned or get into major trouble. Yeah. Oh, sorry, that was an extension on your question. Yes. So I totally understand what you mean. But I don't necessarily think that comes down to being mixed. I think that's more just to do with this specific issue from your parents, and not necessarily the fact because you're coming from a mixed background. Will you ever have guest speakers on your Tea with B? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked. That's actually what this second seat is meant to be for. So I am hoping to get a proper setup, like a better camera for you guys so you can see the full thing. But this setup, this Middle Eastern, corner, tea corner, if you like, that I got was because I wanted to have me on one side and another person on the other side and having actual discussions. So it's a work in progress, guys. Eventually, inshallah, I'm going to have people on and talking about different things. So we'll see how we go. All right. I know I just missed a lot of questions, so I'm going to have to scroll back up. All right. Where will this be uploaded at the end? YouTube. I always upload Tea with B onto YouTube. It's recording on another camera now. And yeah, everything. Sorry, I was just reading something at the same time. So you'll be able to see it all there. Yes, sis, it definitely brought my partner and I closer. Thank God. This is how my parents feel exactly this way. I'm so sorry, Mary. That's awful. It's honestly, it's so sad when people blame the other parent for whatever fault it is that they think they've identified in someone. So I can totally relate to you on that one. All right. I can't believe how fast the time goes when I'm on here. It's already half an hour that I've been on. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to answer the last few questions. I'm going to have to wrap this up, guys. I'm so sorry. How has your faith impacted your journey of PTSD? Thank you and blessings. Thank you so much. God bless you as well. How has my faith impacted my journey? I really reckon I should make a proper video about that, because I feel like my spontaneous response like this, and it's not being well thought out or well planned, isn't going to do it justice. But like, for example, whenever I get people telling me, I've met a lot of atheists in my life, actually, and I have a lot of close friends that are atheists, and that's fine. But a lot of the time people question me in my faith and, say XYZ reasons as to why I shouldn't be believing in God. And my argument back is always this, and it's always a personal one. Obviously, I could give more of a theological response, but I always give a more of a personal response for this reason. Quite literally, the only reason I am here, and I'm so sorry to say this so bluntly on a live, but the only reason I'm here is because of religion, because of my faith, I should say. I don't want to necessarily say religion, because the context of religion and faith are slightly different. The only reason I am still here today is because of my faith. There were at least 3 situations growing up where I questioned so many things because my childhood was that traumatic. And the only reason I remained here and didn't do anything that I would have regretted, or anything that, in hindsight would have been the wrong choice, would literally be because of the simple fact that I had faith in God. Without that, I wouldn't be here. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is the discipline that comes from prayer guided me in such a mature way. It was literally a teacher unto itself. Praying and using prayer as a means to not only pause and, if you like, meditate, and then also reflect on what I should be grateful for, to give gratitude, to express that spirit of gratitude, and to put that out into the energy in my life. It is literally one of the biggest healers for me. So when people try to argue with me whether God is real or not, to be honest with you, that's not even the important part to me anymore. Whether or not God is real, whether or not when I die, and I'm proven, if I'm to be proven wrong, it really doesn't matter, because what faith does for me in this life is second to none. Nothing gives me what faith gave me growing up and what it continues to give me today. Because So to answer your question, yes, my faith is probably one of the biggest things that has saved me in my mental health journey, because quite literally for two main things. One, it's kept me alive, and 2, it's given me a discipline in gratitude, which has helped me see things in a more positive light when things were overwhelmingly negative. Gratitude in prayer forced me to be more positive, even when it was really hard to be. I hope that answers your question. Yes, the other said the sessions are usually an hour long, but I'm trying to keep them at a half hour because I'm trying to do, quality over quantity. I feel like when it drags out for an hour, it tends to be not necessarily the quality doesn't seem it seem to be that, of substance. I feel like I'm blabbering. So yeah. All right. Oh, sorry. I went all the way back up to the too far. Have you ever been to EDMR therapy? And if you haven't, would you consider trying it? I'm sorry, I don't even know what that is. I'll have to check. I'll have to look that up when I finish the live. Do you have difficulty connecting? Do you have difficulty connecting to your Australian identity because your family is from elsewhere? I love this country. I do. I think Australia is beautiful, and I actually probably didn't realize how much so until I was living in London, and I realized how much I took the weather for granted and the landscape for granted. So I'll preface my answer with I love this country. But no, I don't feel like my identity is at all what you would consider a typical Australian. Growing up with my Australian friends, when they used to talk about, their Sunday barbies, their Sunday barbecues, and, the little camping trips they went on with their families, and, the way they celebrated Christmas, the way they celebrated birthdays, and the way they celebrated Easter, I related to none of it. There was nothing, even the way down to the simpler cultural elements, the food they ate at home, the way they treated their parents versus the way I did, or rather the way they were permitted to treat their parents versus myself, the way they would dress, the way I would dress, on every possible element, even down to the way I speak, even down to the way, my family's influence the way I speak, and versus Australians, if depending on what you want to define as an Australian, right? But that I never ever related to them. So whilst yes, I am incredibly proud to be an Australian, I struggle so much to identify in the typical cultural manner of an Australian. It's just not something I've ever fully connected with, and it's not that I don't want to connect with it. It's just that the cultures I grew up with were rather different. And actually, as I've gotten older, I've become so patriotic of those cultures that I don't really actually, in all honesty, make time to try and connect to what you would consider generic Australian culture. So, yeah, I definitely don't identify as, just a typical Australian. I feel like that's quite evident from my social media. If you were to see, like, content creators that identify as, Australian, Aussie creators, it's really different to my content. It's really different to my expression of self, if you like. Let's word it like that. They're very, sun-kissed and, beachy, and barbecues, and the hikes in their caravans or in their utes, and watching the sunset or sunrise in the back of their trailer or their etc. It's such a stereotype, I know, but it is a huge part of our culture, amongst other things. So yeah, now I feel like I missed a lot of questions. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know what EDMR is as well. I have absolutely no idea. Okay, let me see. You are truly motivational. I love your positivity and how you glow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let's answer the last couple of questions. All right. Eye movement desensitization therapy. Eye movement desensitization therapy. I'm going to look this up because I have no idea what that is. Before I got to it. Oh, yes. I have no idea what that is. I've never heard of it. I'll definitely look into it. I'm quite curious now as to what that means. Like, what's the end goal of it? Hi! All right, I'm going to scroll all the way to the end, guys. God bless you as well, Liz. Thank you. All right. Do you have PTSD or CPTSD? Do you have symptoms? Sorry if it's personal. No, it's all good. I have PTSD. I don't have CPTSD. I have PTSD. But I've always only ever spoken of that. All right, scrolling down. I'm just in love with the positive energy. Thank you so much. All right. Let's look at there's 3 questions that have been sent in that I didn't look at. I'm so sorry. First, where do you live now? I live in Australia. How long is the live going for? I've got classes early tomorrow. I'm so sorry. The live is ending. It's already been 46 minutes. The live is ending now. I'm just wrapping up with the last couple of questions, and then I will post this up on YouTube in a couple of days. What do you think of the other Abrahamic religions? I love history, so I actually quite enjoy learning about the other 2 Abrahamic faiths. I've read not really near enough about Judaism, but I actually have read the Quran, and I studied it, and just for the sake of knowledge, I looked into both the other religions. I find it quite interesting. From a history perspective, it's really enjoyable. So yeah, from a history perspective, I like it. I hope that answers your question. All right, guys, I really have to jet. It's quite late here. It's almost 11 p.m. And it is a work night. But I'm really glad I was able to come back on and do this talking. Tea with me. I was about to mention my YouTube name. And tea with B, not bed talks with Varna, tea with B. All right. Thank you. I'm so glad I got this PTSD part 2 session out. Talking PTSD. That's what I was trying to say. Anyway, I will notify you guys on my story when it's uploaded onto YouTube. I will be back inshallah next week on Wednesday on live, and I'll have the YouTube video uploaded before that inshallah. Anyway, thank you so much everyone for joining. Hopefully I've answered your questions sufficiently well and nicely. And thank you for coming and listening to me talk. I really enjoyed it. Much love everyone. God bless. You guys take care as well. Yalla, goodbye guys.